Do you know how to love yourself? This is Robert Manni, host of Guys Radio, and we're going to tackle that subject on the show this week. We've got two guests. We've got Blake D. Bauer. He's written this book, You Were Not Born to Suffer. We've also got Dr. Gary Salyer. We're going to talk about his book, Safe to Love Again. All on Guys Radio at 8 p.m. Pacific time on KCAA Radio here in Southern California, 102.3, 106.5 FM, 1050 AM. The podcast and YouTube dropped worldwide on Thursday. Guys Radio, thanks for your support and have a happy Thanksgiving. Okay, Guys Radio, your host, Robert Manni, and I am very pleased to have a return guest to Guys Radio. His name is Dr. Gary Salyer, PhD, and he has written a book about being safe to love again. And he was on the show previously. It's about how to release the pain of past relationships and create the love you deserve. And it's very relevant today in the time of COVID, in the time of so much divisiveness out there. So I want to have Gary back and kind of update us on what's going on with his work and also talk about COVID and how we can connect. Now, let me tell you a little bit about his background. After Gary's first divorce, he vowed that his next marriage would be different. So when that crumbled, almost a decade later, for the same reasons, he felt like kind of like a failure, but rather than give in, he was determined to find another way. He dedicated himself to doing deep research about all things love. And love, how to make it lasting, became his life's highest calling, not just for himself, but for others. And he's really a guy who's based on service, and he's a real guy's guy. And he's developed a powerful and effective methodology to make it safe to love again for many of those out there. And I'm sure you know a lot of folks like this who've kind of given up hope on love. Now, he bases his work on a field called attachment theory, the science of intimate relationships. And Gary's insights have profound and oftentimes immediate impact. He's a transformational relationship mentor. He helps people rewrite the rules of love in their brains. Because of his innovative new approach that rewires brains to secure love, singles and couples experience deep, lasting shifts that happen in easy, natural ways. And therapists are even saying his new approach will change the way therapists do therapy. And why I wanted to have Gary on here is, again, to talk about love in the time of COVID, kind of update us on his work, and also with all the divisiveness that we have going around, because dating in COVID's tough, long-term relationships in COVID's tough. It's just a crazy world we're in right now. So I thought Gary would be the perfect guest at the perfect time. Welcome back to Guys Radio, Dr. Gary Salyer.
Thank you, Robert, for having me on. I'm glad to be back on Guys Radio.
So let's just, for the benefit of our listeners and some who may not have caught our first podcast or are familiar with your work, tell us a little bit about what your principles are in terms of how you address love and the aspect of being safe to love again, because there's so many people out there who kind of don't feel worthy because they've been single for so long or they've had failed relationships, etc.
Thank you, Robert. And I agree with you. I've been saying for some time that there's an epidemic, not only of COVID, but of unworthiness out there. So many people are afraid they're not enough or they'll never be enough or whatever. So in the book I describe, Safe to Love Again, attachment theory is simply the science of how your brain got wired to love and be loved. Usually from experience 0 to 3, believe it or not. But later experience also happens. So if you had a horrible first marriage, that can affect it, right? Now, what I argue in the book is very simple, that if we get 4 key feelings when we're 0 to 3, that those feelings become like templates or permission slips to have more experience like that. And that's what allows us to pick and choose better love. Those 4 feelings that are your brain's natural GPS are welcomed with joy. Do you feel really welcomed by someone? Oh, good seeing you today, Robert. That sort of thing. Or you wake up in the morning and you hear, good morning, gorgeous, or good morning, handsome. That's welcome with joy. What worthy and nourished to have your needs met means it's okay to reach out, to not just give, but to receive, to take. And you know that it's going to be an attuned response. You're worthy to have your needs met. Cherished and protected, which is you get to be a me, you get to go out and have your world, but you get to come back to the home port of somebody's heart. As a guy, you may think of respected or honored is maybe the word you might use, and someone has your back. And then empowered with choice. You get to have a voice. Somebody shares influence with you. If you got those four feelings, they predict that you will pick and choose pretty good relationships, maintain in a pretty way. But if you got any of the other ones, like maybe unwelcome or unworthy or uncherished or disempowered, if they become your GPS, you'll pick someone who gives you the same feeling back of unworthy or disempowered. So the key for feeling safe to love again is to restore your brain's natural GPS. So you are picking and choosing and creating based on the feeling of being welcomed, being worthy, being cherished or respected, and being empowered. That's it's feeling.
So how does one kind of reassess themselves and rebuild themselves to be in a position to accept self-love and then be in a position where they can receive and attract the love of another? Let me give you a quick example.
Okay.
I was single for many years and I had failed relationships. They were successful for a certain period of time, but they never got over the finish line, if you will. And I asked myself, what am I doing wrong? And my intuition told me, you're not, you don't have room, you're not making room for somebody else in your life. It's all about you. You got to make room for somebody else. And for me, when I had that epiphany, I knew I had it. And sure enough, I was engaged a year later, and I've been married for 10 years. Does that tie into your process? I mean, that's
Okay.
just my personal experience. I'm not saying, it fits in perfectly, but um, I don't know if it was about self-worth, but it was about something missing and having to go back and reassess.
Yes, reassess, you know. So when I hear that story, Robert, what I talk about a right to separate and belong. Now, belong is all about creating a we. It's about making room for somebody else. So there's room in your garage, for their car. There's room in your schedule for somebody. And if at some point in time we being separate felt like the best deal possible, then we don't create enough space for we, and then those relationships crumble. When I work with couples, I can tell you for a certainty that you show me a couple where there's not a we, and I'll show you a war. The we is so important, and somewhere along the line, your brain just learned that it was safer and easier to be separate. But when that template runs in a relationship, eventually it causes conflict and loneliness and frustration, and those don't work out so well.
Mhm. Now, how can you qualify a potential partner if you have the we mentality and you've done the self work and you've read your book, etc., and now they're out there meeting people, and immediately I think they're going to say this person has a lot of work to do. This person, no, is a potential. How do they do that qualification?
Okay, the what I tell all singles, if you're out there looking, there are there's four things you're looking at plus one other. You're looking for those four feelings. After 4, 5, 6 dates, take an assessment. How welcomed with joy do you feel? Really welcomed,
Hmm.
worthy, cherished, and empowered. Yeah. And then after that, you're looking for signs of the we. Are they showing signs that they are real partnership material, that they're willing to share influence, they're willing to hold your dreams at the same level as their own, that they're not willing to sacrifice your needs at the cost of your needs so they can have their own needs met in a better way. And a perfect example of that is like about a month or two ago, a woman meets somebody, really cool looking guy, and the sixth text, he suggests going on some app, and she goes, I don't know about that. And he goes, you're kind of stupid with technology, aren't you? And so how much welcomed and worthy, there's contempt there. And I said, well, if this is the sixth, you know, text, run, right?
Hmm.
But just notice that she goes, this doesn't feel right. Of course it didn't. It's not welcoming, and there's contempt rather than cherished.
Okay.
So you want to look at those, and after about the first month, start looking for what sort of we are they creating.
Hmm. Okay. Now we're in a time of there's a lot of divisiveness. You've got we've got political divisiveness, and I'm sure you've heard from couples where one person's a Democrat, the other person's a Republican, and in the past it didn't matter, but now it seems to matter because we're at this tipping point now. But also, we have COVID. Now, COVID has changed the way people date. So, how do those two factors impact relationships, whether it be singles or couples?
Okay, let's take the political stuff going on first. Okay, look at how much hypervigilance there is by everyone because chaos is running the show. And I can honestly tell you the first week after the last election in 2016, I had 10 emergency sessions. And for the couples, it was because these wives felt like the fox was guarding the hen house. And their husbands weren't getting why they were so upset. Now, what happens is if there's any sexual abuse in a woman's past, this guy's history is a red light and they don't feel safe. Then the mania is kind of continued, and so it's almost as if when you are dealing with someone who has a personality disorder, and I'm just going to be very honest, there's chaos. You're always looking over, so your defenses never go down. Now, what that does for couples is while you're being distracted, you're not paying attention to their bids. While we only have so much energy, and it's distracting for all of us who are in a relationship, lest we get taken down a road because some part of our brain wants to always feel safe when we don't anymore.
Do you think, and again, this is Robert Manni, host of Guys Radio. My special guest is Dr. Gary Salyer. He's returned to talk about his book, Safe to Love Again, and also all things COVID and politics, actually, with relationships. So can somebody who's a Republican and a Democrat right now with all the craziness, can they get along? Do you find that or is that becoming like if you're a woman and you're like, okay, I'm not for the president or whatever, and this guy I'm dating, he's all in. Can they make a go of it, or is it going to be that much of a factor where it's just not going to work?
Well, first off, we have to, there's two issues here. It used to be that American politics was about center left, center right. Republican being center right, Democrats. There was a lot of room, more shared values. I voted for Republican and Democratic presidents.
Me too. I have.
Right, and at no time did I ever think if my guy didn't win that we were screwed as a country. Now the thing here, as we polarized and became a lot due to this what I call boutique news that caters only to people's stuff, we grew apart. And if you notice what's going on, especially on social media, there is all this criticism and contempt that's being leveled, and then defensiveness, defending at all costs, even when reason would suggest. Now, I can tell you that those three things, criticism, defensiveness, and contempt, along with stonewalling, will predict the demise of a couple with 94% accuracy in 6.8 years. Now, that's not going to work with our friends, with our wives, and it won't work for our country. There is so much of that. And I think for most couples, if you're single and they are all really radically over there and this is not what you believe in, there's a values conflict. But if you're just normal, middle of the class, pretty much center left, center right, there's plenty of room for respect for your friends. I have neighbors that voted the other way, from me. And we have wonderful conversations because I value them for more than their opinions. And I think that's important. See the value of the person. Don't get caught up in the position. Now, if you're single and some guy really holds a woman, or if your guy, the woman holds some positions that are really not yours, there is something about values alignment.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Let's get into COVID then. If you're single nowadays, it's tough enough to be single to begin with these days. And then you've also got the political aspect of it. with COVID and the uncertainty of it, nobody's got a grip on this thing. This is one of the few times in our lifetimes in America where individuals feel that, we're on our own. I don't think anybody would disagree that there's kind of no plan in place and the virus is out there, and whatever you think of it, nobody's got a handle on it. So we have to make our own decisions, and hopefully we're respectful of ourselves and others. But as part of dating, how does one how does a single proceed in this time of COVID to date? Or is it just better to just go back, work on yourself, and wait till this thing blows over, hopefully next year?
Well, I know some people are doing the latter. They're working on themselves. I've had a few people sign up. But I can tell you there's a kind of a beautiful silver lining to COVID. It used to be the scourge of online dating was swipe left, swipe left, swipe left, swipe left, and nobody was swiping down to get to know each other. Fear of missing out. They get in a relationship that's pretty good as potential. Well, maybe there's somebody better out there. Well, now you can't meet them. So, when you meet someone, then you have to invest more fully. What I'm telling singles, is that there's two things. One is when you meet somebody that's pretty good, get online, get on Zoom, get on Skype, and you get to know them. Find out what your comfort level is with their social distancing practices. Now, if you learn enough, and don't do these 5-hour conversations, half hour is good enough, 45 minutes, right? But multiple times, get a feel for their life, get a feel for their energy. And then if you really want to get together, you create what I call a preliminary couple bubble. Now, every couple has this bubble that's supposed to protect them. Now, I'm not talking about the committed, ring on the finger type, just enough so that you talk and say, this is what I'm comfortable with. Are you comfortable with social distancing? So that you quarantine for 2 weeks, you actually create a space so it's safe to get together, so you can hold hands, so you can kiss at the end of the date. And you got to know your level of comfort, and you figure out from knowing them a little bit on Skype, does it sound like their lifestyle you can trust? You debate it, and then you allow yourselves to date in that way. I've literally had several of my single women clients do it, and it doesn't mean after 5 or 6 or 7 dates, one of them said, no, that wasn't quite the right guy, right? But they were able to have normal dating because they committed to doing the safety that it took for them to actually date.
So I would assume then, Gary, that we want to be careful when in dating, meeting somebody new, that these answers are ferreted out in a way that doesn't feel like an interview. Because too often, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, people go out on a date and they meet somebody the first time and they ask all these questions that are really about them, not about the other person. And then they start factoring in who this other person is based on what their own personal opinions and experiences have been. And sometimes it's over before it's begun because you haven't given the chance for the two of you, the we, to experience the beauty of meeting and having a new shared experience with a new person. So exactly. If that's the case, which I think it is, how then do you layer that COVID aspect on top of it without being like a checklist when you're talking to somebody? And when is the best time to get this information out there? During your Zoom talks? So you don't want to talk about when we kiss for the first time during a Zoom talk, of course. How do you kind of navigate that slippery pathway?
Okay. Well, just kind of notice that if you're doing an all points bulletin, job interview, your first Zoom call or date, that's not exactly welcomed with joy. Nobody feels real welcomed with joy at HR. It's just not. What you want to do is start off with an attitude of appreciation. Get to know them, make it lighter. It's not about finding the one. It's just noticing what did you enjoy them? Did you laugh? Did you like the energy? This takes a little time. You got to slow it down to do what I was saying. And then, it comes up, see if it comes up naturally. You can say, so how do you, somebody says, gosh, it's really frustrating wearing a mask, or no, I always do. And you hear things, you ask, how do you feel about wearing a mask? Mm-hmm. Or they tell you, every Thursday, I used to meet with 8 guys and we did cards. Or they tell you they're still doing it. And then is that something you feel comfortable with? It's not an interview process. It's not, here's my 10 COVID questions.
Right.
It's getting to know them. And then if there's enough energy saying, you're really a great gal, but that bridge party with 15 people, that doesn't cut it.
Concerns me, right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So the last topic really is couples, which I thought was very provocative. Something when you wrote to me, couples are experiencing either endings or a tightening of the relationship. I know for myself, I like hanging out with my wife. So the fact that we've been together with my home, you can get a little bit. Everybody's got to have their separate space and all of that. But I actually like my wife as a person. She's my best friend, and it's fun to hang out with her. And I like most people I hang out with. I like to be with them. It's not like I've had enough of you. But there are a lot of relationships, is my understanding, that even though they've been together 20, 30 years or whatever, that this COVID thing, too much on top of each other, that they can't handle it. And maybe it's because people, two jobs, people are just going their separate ways. They eat at different times. It's appointment based. It's like you're, having sex with your roommate or whatever sometimes, where it becomes, kind of just a process, if you will. What's going on there? And that's being discovered. Do you find that?
Oh yeah. I mean, what singles got is suddenly they all have to be separate, social distancing, and they don't have any right to belong anymore. They don't have to go out and have decent relationships. The opposite happened. Couples got way too much right to belong and not enough right to separate. This is a Goldilocks thing I talk about in the book. It's like your lungs breathing it out. You breathe in, you go out, and then you come back. You go out, you come back. Nobody was meant to trip under each other's feet 24/7. And there's too many bids for attention. It overheats the whole thing. So what I tell couples is you're going to have to negotiate real separation. There may be a time, or there may be a chair you sit in, or there may be a sign. And when they say if that's their time, how much separation you do, how do you demarcate it? So you don't make a bid for connection when they're sitting in the chair knitting. There needs to be time for them to be separate. Okay. And then you also have to make every feeling okay. COVID is like an airport, like O'Hare Airport, with all sorts of feelings landing, and we have got to be the air traffic controllers. And what that means is we make all feelings okay. The day will come, the hour will come when something freaks you or them out, and they're going to be bouncing off walls. You listen just for the feeling. You don't try to fix. You go, wow, that does feel scary. Tell me more about that. Oh, that's disappointing. Okay. What's the worst part about that? And then there's got to be a rule, though. Only one person can freak out. It has to be a security. If one person freaks out, the other one holds down the fort emotionally for the couple. And then the other thing is, there's going to be a lot of feelings of overwhelm and everything. And not only do you have to share influence more, especially if she's doing homeschooling, she needs a lot more support if she's got a career, right? But remember to share the positive feelings as well. Remember why you got together. There's research that shows that if couples can share for 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, positive feelings with an example. So, what I noticed is you're so very caring, like the time, you just cooked supper today, for all of us in a very special way, or whenever it was.